Hello, cute friends. This is Gina. Welcome to the TheReBookery channel. Today I'm going to do another spread in my Days of Summer journal. This is going to be a spread about my trip to Colorado. And it's going to start off going one way, and then it's going to end up being about stars again. So if you don't like stars, you might not want to watch this video. Okay, so I have this book. It's been sitting on my shelf for a really long time. I'll be honest, I don't know where I got it. It is absolutely amazing. I didn't even realize it had this book jacket. But the reason why I'm going to use the book jacket is because I love the subtitle. It says the stars, a new way to see stars. And I love that phrase. So that's why I pulled this off the shelf. I didn't realize that it had an amazing book jacket with that whole night sky. So yeah, don't worry, don't freak out. I'm going to use that for another layout. So it's not going to go to waste. And I'm actually really glad that I pulled it apart. Okay, so I'm going to do this spread on the back of the last process video spread that I did. And that was about the nighttime sky that I saw when we were in Colorado. This one is going to actually be about trees, and it's going to be about daytime. But I want to use this book jacket because it's going to set the stage for the way that I interpreted what I saw. So in my last video, I talked a little bit about I could take a picture of what it is I want to document. And a lot of times I do. I take pictures of everything. And I'm pretty diligent about printing my pictures out too. So I have scads and scads of photos that I've printed out. And I'm always using those to document. But sometimes I can't get a picture to represent what I want the meaning to be, or the feeling to be, or how I experienced it. I just can't capture that with a picture, a photo. And so this is kind of one of those times, although I am going to use a picture. And I actually have two copies of this picture. So I have a larger one and I have a smaller one. I originally was going to use the smaller one. But I went ahead and printed it off bigger because as I was looking at this photo, I was like, oh, that's really cool. I see a star in the center of the photo. So let me explain what this photo is. This was a day that we took a hike. And this hike, it was like 8 miles. And it was an out and back. So we went in, we did this hike, and then you have to turn around and you come back. And oh my gosh, the weather was crazy. By the time we got back, we were in a hailstorm. The last mile was in this hailstorm. Teeny tiny pellets. So it could have been more of like just an ice storm. I don't know. We were so far up in the mountains. It's hard to tell when something is a hailstorm and something is just ice pellets falling from the sky. Because being from Missouri, you know when it's hail. But up in the mountains, it was kind of hard to tell. But anyway, whatever. So this was at the beginning of the hike, and we went through this forest part, and I just thought it was so cool to be underneath the canopy of these trees. Again, being from Missouri, this isn't something that I normally see. And so I took this picture of looking straight up at the sky, because I'd always seen pictures like this, but I never really understood how cool they were until I was actually experiencing that. And then I was like, oh my God, that is so cool. When you take a picture like that from where you're standing and you look straight up at the sky, you see a border of these trees, and then you see a little bit of the sky. So I thought that was cool. But when I printed the picture off and I looked at the sky, I was like, oh, wow, that looks like a star. And so that's where I kind of married the two things, stars and then the picture of me standing below these trees. I was trying to find something that could be a good background, and just happened to look through my shelf of books, and I saw this book jacket And again, it said the stars, a new way to see them. And so that's what drew me to this book jacket. Okay, so now that I've caught you all up, what I'm going to do is just have this be a very simple layout. I just want to document. I'm not documenting a whole bunch of things. I'm just documenting this one moment, this one teeny tiny little fragment of my day. And so I have just this one picture. It's going to be the focal point. And then I'm just going to put a bunch of remnants of papers and things around it as a border. I have some constellation tape. I think it's got like gold, like dots and lines to look like constellations. I have there's some tape right there that I think has moons and stuff on it, maybe. And then I think I have one more thing of tape that maybe has stars on it. I can't remember what, but I tried to use some space tape just because it was going to be such a weird way of me trying to do this layout of trees and connecting it to space. And then just because I needed a pop of color, I'm just using some wrapping paper scraps that I had in my drawer. And I know I veered off a little bit from my original plan on my travel journal was to just use the supplies I'd put in my plastic folder. And I did really, really good with that when I was actually on vacation and I was doing some journaling and scrapping and stuff like that. I stuck to those supplies. And when I do the flip through, I'll show you how I improvised because there were a couple of times where I was like, oh, I wish I had this, but I made do with what I had. But now that I'm back home, I'm pulling out a couple other things because it's not just about documenting. This is more about artistic things. So now what I wanted to do was I really wanted to highlight that sky. So I found a marker that would actually, a lot of times when I write on these photos, the writing will not stay. The ink won't stay. So I had to find a pen that will work. And believe it or not, this is a Dollar Tree highlighter. And I love it. It came in a pack of 4. I think there was like a green, yellow, orange, blue, maybe. I can't remember. And I love them. The color, it's like translucent and yeah. So I just went ahead and I scribbled in that sky to kind of pull out that star shape. And I did a technique. I know it's like it's a real artistic technique, but I made my lines go one way and then I went back and I made my lines go the other way. I think it's called cross hatching. I didn't do a really good job of it, but I think it's an artistic skill that artists use when they're shading stuff in. And so I kind of did that. So my lines kind of go back and forth. Now I'm just looking for something else to add to this because it's just so, it's flat. Like I need something else. And it's too literal. I need to somehow pull in some of my weird quirkiness. And so I'm looking at the text from the book jacket, and there was actually a couple of little phrases that was in like the inside corner. And I'm going to have to look. Let me look at the actual page here. I've got it in my journal. I think this one says, all I did, says Mr. Ray, who is the author of this book, was draw straight lines between the stars of constellation in such a way that the resulting shape makes sense. What surprises me is that nobody has done it before. The basic idea is so simple. And I thought some of those words kind of spoke to what I was witnessing. And then this next part that I'm cutting out, combining the artist's imagination with the scientist's accuracy, he brings the whole celestial family to life. I love that sentence. The artist's imagination with the scientist's accuracy. I love that because it's the science of the trees. It's the science of being in that particular habitat and then pulling in my imagination. I mean, because I have such a crazy imagination. I found a star. I found a star as I was walking during the day on a trail. And yeah, that's kind of crazy that I would come up with that connection. But anyway, so I put those little pieces on, and then I have some stars, some of those gold foil stars, and I pulled blue and green because these aren't your typical stars that I'm talking about. Remember, this is a new way to see stars. They're blue stars because it's the sky. They're kind of green stars because it's the trees. And so that's why I'm putting those on there. And then the last thing I do is I do my journaling. And I'm going to journal in a white pen. It's my Uniball Signal pen, and it's kind of finicky sometimes. So I've opened this pen a couple of months ago. So usually if you don't use it all up in one fell swoop, the ink will kind of get a little splotchy. And so what I'm doing right now is I'm looking for the pen. So that's why you guys are just sitting here seeing nothing. And then I find my pen. And so I'm just writing, and I'm going to go around the edge of the paper. And so here's what I wrote. Never really knew how awesome it was to look up through a forest of trees until I actually did it. After a while, I started to see the tree. It says after a while, I couldn't see the trees anymore. I just see a star-shaped sky. There you go. Sorry, I was reading it upside down. So that was my journaling. And yeah, that's more poetic than I normally am. But yeah, it worked. And so that was just a simple way to document this cool observation that I made while I was hiking on this trail. And I love it. And it's in my journal. And it reminds me of that day. And as for the little picture that was off to the side, I decided that, because there's so much more I want to say about this day, because while we were on this trail actually went through a couple of little towns. So we made some stops, like we stopped for lunch. And we stopped because I had to buy some new shoes, because about 4 miles into my trip, actually it was more of about 3 miles into our trip on this trail, my shoes started to fall apart. Now, granted, they were 17-year-old shoes. I'd had them for a really long time, but they started to fall apart. And so one of the stops we made was to buy a new pair of shoes. And it just happened to be that there was this cool store right on the trail, and they were selling shoes. So I got a pair of shoes. So there's a bunch of things I want to document about this day. I also want to document the hailstorm and how we walked in it, and it was just amazing. So I'm going to use that little picture when I document the rest of this day. All right, my friends, here is my layout. I hope you got some inspiration from this. I hope you are happy. I hope you are healthy. And I will talk to you next time. Bye.